Hello. Welcome to our Animation Resources live stream. This one is another members update. I'm Davey, Jarrell. I'm a storyboard artist in TV animation, currently on a new show at Nickelodeon, and I serve as the director of programming at Animation Resources. And I've got a guest with me today, also a storyboard artist and fellow Animation Resources board member, Pez. David Hofmann goes by Pez. Hi, Pez.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here on such short notice.
I guess I'm also a fellow Nickelodeon employee right now.
Oh, yeah, you are. So today we're going to be going over our most recent members reference pack. But before we do that, we're going to talk about Animation Resources. So Animation Resources is supported by our paying members. As a member of Animation Resources, you get unlimited access to a new reference pack every other month. They're expertly curated by our other board member, President Stephen Worth, who's, I think, more well-versed in animation history and education than anyone else I know. And it's full of material that you'd never otherwise see. It's everything you need to know that you didn't know you needed. It's only $70 if you're a student and $95 for the general membership. Well, I think we should look at, we should run through our current reference pack to give everyone a sneak peek of what
that's awesome.
we show.
That's good.
Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hello. I was just typing to you.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that you wanted to say hi.
Yeah.
I'm going to share
the reference pack. I may be able to kibitz a little bit and add some stuff.
So it starts off with an ebook of Irv Spector's Coogy, which is a newspaper comic from 1951 to 1954. So the stories in Coogy were satirical, and they covered a wide range of topics: prospectors, singing cowboys, boxing, television, psychiatry. So the group in this particular ebook features a storyline on historical figures like William Shakespeare and Leonardo da Vinci. So these drawings are really bold and simple and graphic, but have so much energy.
I'd never heard of this before.
I hadn't either.
How'd you know about
this?
It's
a very rare strip, actually, because it only ran in it only ran in one newspaper. Excuse me, I don't have my cough button when I'm doing the slideshow. It ran in one newspaper in New York and didn't get any distribution. So everybody knows Pogo, and this is very much like Pogo in the style, but nobody knows Coogy. And at this, it's almost impossible to find these strips, the original strips, because in the old days, people used to do, like you were talking about, scrapbooking, Pez. They would, if they liked a comic strip, they'd cut it out and collect all of the various daily episodes, and then have stacks and stacks of Popeye or stacks and stacks of whatever comic strip they liked. And since this was only in one newspaper, only a limited number of people would have been saving it. So it's almost impossible to find. Jojo ran across a cache of strips and at eBay. And I spent, I want you
dozens
to talk about dozens and dozens of hours. The one newspaper strips I tend to kind of avoid for reference packs because they're a whole lot of work to clean up.
Yeah, I don't think people understand what you did here to make this look this good, because these didn't look this clean when you got them, right?
No, the thing about newspaper comics is they were designed to be ephemeral. They weren't made to last. They were printed on the cheapest brand of paper that yellows and starts turning to brittle chips after a while.
Pretty flimsy.
Yeah, and this is from 54 or something like that. So this is a very, very old piece of newsprint. The other problem is that since a newspaper was daily, they printed every newspaper for the entire city in one night. It's kind of a amazing feat that we don't, today we just hit publish on the internet and automatically the whole world gets it. But back then they had to print a physical copy for everybody who subscribed to the newspaper on one night. They'd put the newspaper to bed, is what they called it, at 10 o'clock at night, and the printers would start running, and the presses would just run and knock them out. And then the next morning at 4 a.m, they'd be picking up copies and taking them out to the newsstands and delivering them to people on their doorsteps. So you can imagine the amount of time for printing was very, very short. And because of this, they didn't have time to really finesse the presses. And you end up with color layers that are out of register to each other almost always. So like the yellow might be 1/8 of an inch one direction and the red might be 1/8 of an inch another direction. And what that does is it creates all these colored, overlaps everywhere, like a coloring book that isn't colored properly.
Yeah.
And I went through in Photoshop and actually painted the colors back in, which is easier said than done because these colors are not pure colors. In other words,
they're dots.
Green is not green. Green is yellow dots with blue dots over the top of it. So what I had to do is I had to use clone stamp, blow it up so big that I could actually see the individual dots, and then clone a section of clean dots in that color over a section that was messed up, and paint the halftone dots in. So when you blow this up, it took many hours. But Coogy, where do you get it otherwise? That's worth it.
Wow.
So in any case,
this could have been
when you blow this up, it looks like, when you blow this up, this could have been the only
item in this ref pack, though.
Oh, well.
You spent so much time on this. This alone is enough.
Well, I'll tell you what my theory is, and this is a theory that it isn't a very good theory because it doesn't really work very well. But my theory is that when you ask someone to be a member of an organization and pay dues, you give them back more than they're paying. And I do that constantly. The problem is that unless you're a member, you don't realize how much you're getting because the reference packs are behind a subscription wall. So only members can get in to look at it. So the only people that know how great the stuff is are the people that are already members. And the people who aren't members, we try to, talk about it in our podcasts, and we try to share samples and things like that. But essentially what we're doing at Animation Resources is helping you build the ultimate cartooning library. And there's stuff in here that we share in our reference packs that you're never going to see again, that you'll get a PDF of it and it'll be like this. And I will take the time to do it right, to make the images absolutely perfect. Even if that takes dozens and hundreds of hours, we take the time because we're laying it down into a PDF and then distributing it to everybody in our membership. And I know that all of our members are taking this stuff and putting it on hard drives and folders, all organized. And 20 years after I'm dead, someone's going to say, hey, I remember seeing something in an Animation Resources reference pack once that would be absolutely perfect for what I'm working on now to inspire me to do what I need to do. And they'll go back, and something that 20 years before they had looked at now suddenly becomes something incredibly valuable to them. So that's when you're talking about libraries, Davey, that's exactly what it is. A library isn't something that
I need
television
right now. It's
not like television where you're watching a show and you're being entertained right now. A library is something that gets set on the shelf and it's there. It's part of it's part of your entire experience.
Yeah.
and you can go back to it anytime you want. So, well, in any case, I spent way too much time on these Coogies, but man, do they look
Thank
good.
You for doing
do
it.
they look
Thank
good.
You.
And the drawings in this are fantastic. The inking is fantastic. The energy in these drawings is incredible. If someone can draw half as much energy in the poses as this guy gets, Irv Spector was a genius. He was great. And he did all kinds of things.
What was there?
He was an animator.
Did he animate? Yeah, where did he work as an animator?
Everywhere from Fleischer to Hanna-Barbera to Warner Brothers to just about every studio on the West and East Coasts.
So was he working at studios while he was doing this as well, the comics at the same time?
No, the comics, he took a break, and he actually was invited to he was invited to become a part of Mad Magazine when it was a comic book, and he had to turn it down because Coogy was taking up so much of his time. But he wanted to do everything. He was one of those guys that he did funny animal comics. He did everything.
Oh yeah, that's why the artwork looks familiar. So he worked in that series, huh?
Yeah,
funny animal comic series.
Yeah, he did. The Goofy the Goat and all that kind of stuff. Those are horrible comics to read, but boy, the drawings are beautiful and great principles to follow. In any case, that's enough on Coogy. We should move on, right, Davey?
Yeah. Well,
thank you for telling us the history of this. Though I knew that you were working on this, and I thought it was important that our members appreciate how much you put into that amazing strip.
I didn't realize.
Well, I just want him to appreciate Coogy. I just want him to appreciate Coogy. That's
not the restoring work you did, but
I try to.
I mean, the deal is, Steve, is that you found something that was worth the effort, and you did it right.
And
somebody
I've done
else
that many times. So this is what number is this we were talking, Davey? 48.
48.
This is the 48th reference pack. That's an awful lot of ebooks, and that's an awful lot of animated films that I've cleaned up and processed so that you can still frame through them, and written articles on each one so that you know the context of where the film came from and what you can see in the film that you can apply to your own work. This is something that should be done more that isn't done. When people say, animation resources, what other kind of organizations do what you do? Well, nobody does what we do. What we do is curation for artists by artists.
Yeah, because like other places, you could go to an archive, and you can just that the artwork is protected, but it isn't necessarily there so you can use it and learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact,
like the one in Ohio.
It's usually so protected that it's hard to use. You got to sit at a table. You have to tell them exactly what you want. I had a friend who came to LA to go to one of the main archives. I won't mention which one, but he wanted to go to research a certain group of films.
Okay.
And the way it worked was it was a reading room with tables, and there was a librarian that sat at a desk, and you had a form that you filled out that said, this is what I'm looking for. This is the specific film that I'm looking for material on. You would hand that to the librarian, and she would go in the back, and about 2.5 hours later, after she's had lunch and a cup of coffee, and 2.5 hours later, she comes back and says, no, I'm sorry, we don't have anything on that film. Do you have any other requests? And you fill out another form and you hand it to her, and it's like this endless game of go fish.
And you're like, can I just go back there and look through what you got? They're like, oh no.
No.
But how you could do that here is you could volunteer at Animation Resources and help us scan.
You bet. I've been spending the last few weeks organizing the libraries here. We have 9 walls in my house here that are full of books that go back to the 1700s. Just incredible art books, cartooning books, all kinds of things. I could tell stories about that, but we really should talk about the reference because this is what you get. So, yeah, this is what you get. So go ahead, Davey. I'll back out here.
We've got 2 CinemaScope cartoons, also from the mid 1950s. So the first one here is called Grand Canyon Scope, and
great cartoon.
So in the early 50s, movie studios were feeling pressure from TV, and research was underway to develop technical advances that TV couldn't match. So 20th Century Fox developed an anamorphic process called CinemaScope. It's a widescreen film could be shot on a single piece of film and projected in existing theaters just by adding a wider screen and using a special lens. So in the early 50s, Disney put their animated feature Lady and the Tramp into production using CinemaScope, and work began on several widescreen cartoon shorts as well, 2 of them being Grand Canyon Scope and No Hunting, which we'll get to in a minute. So Grand Canyon Scope was originally released with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, so it received a higher than normal budget. The background layouts depict the
Ivan Earl
Canyon. Yep.
Ivan Earl backgrounds.
Earl also, I'm sure you know, did the backgrounds for Sleeping Beauty. They're absolutely stunning, and they are way overboard with the textures, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I like it.
I can see how it can be distracting, but I think they're amazing.
It used to be really hard to find a widescreen print of these cartoons. You know, the color looks really good on these. This isn't the overly restored. This is a direct film scan, isn't it?
Yeah. These aren't the ones that you see on Disney Channel. We've one of our advisory board members has been collecting, is in touch with collectors who have original prints of IB Technicolor 35 millimeter actual projection prints of these cartoons. And whenever he runs across one, he makes a point of doing a high definition scan of it and sending it to us for our archive, just so, you know, the original colors are preserved. When they release things on Blu-ray, a lot of times they'll tweak it to make the colors more appealing to modern tastes, is how they put it. But I kind of like the original color palettes that the actual artist chose. Maybe it's a little bit fuzzier and the lines aren't quite as sharp, but
I'm pulling it up right now.
The colors and everything.
This film print is not faded. This is the real color that it's supposed to be, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's incredible. I just pulled up the restored copy just now, and Donald's coat is a bright red, and the entire film looks dark. The remastered version. So I don't know.
We've also been getting copies of the features as well.
Wow.
So like the other day, I shouldn't tell stories out of two. We've got a very good collection of animated films in Animation Resources Library, over 7,000. And whenever we can get a better copy of something, we substitute that in. And the Disney films, you know, they're widely available, but you know, and everything is it's a commercial enterprise when they're releasing it for people on TV or on Disney streaming or channel or any of that sort of thing. So they have different priorities than we do as an archivist, as an archive or historical thing. What we're looking at is, you know, when it's a Mary Blair color palette on the screen, you want to see Mary Blair's colors, I would imagine.
That's what I was going to say is like So some of the most valuable stuff of these Disney films is the color theory. And so I have friends that are background painters, and they're like, I want to take a screenshot and learn the color theory from that. But as these different restorations have been done over the years, the color isn't what the color's not what they did. And so it's almost impossible to learn the real color theory behind these things unless you go and buy at like some auction house the original paintings, which are like thousands of dollars.
One of the projects that I want to get around to at some point, we were loaned a full set of Disney color chips.
Oh,
every single color of paint that Disney ever used. And we digitized them. Every letdown, which it means from pure color to white, and every shade from pure color to black, and every pigment that they used, and every blend of pigments that they used. And, you know, when you look at these colors, these were chosen specifically because Technicolor could reproduce them.
Okay.
And so the colors you're looking at are pretty close to the colors that are on the screen. The problem is that when you then take an untimed negative and transfer it to video, do a video scan, you can end up with a completely different color palette, because obviously when you're working in digital, you can make any color you want. You can make Ranger Woodlore wear a Santa Claus outfit if you want. So there's no baseline to follow. And someday I'm hoping these color chips will come in handy to act as a reference for what the colors actually were. But in the meantime, we've got these IB Tech prints that are just gorgeous. And as many as we can get digitized and in our collection, we're doing that. We're also doing the same for other studios as well, and not just American films. We're trying to archive Russian films, Polish films, Japanese films, Chinese films, films from Europe, Mexico, South America, Zagreb, all over the world. Germany, I'll let you get back. This is I love talking about this.
I love hearing it. I'm sitting here. I just pulled up the exact frame on Disney Plus of this cartoon. Doesn't look like the same cartoon.
Yeah.
It's so different that if you were a painter and you want to learn color theory, the Disney Plus version doesn't even work.
Well, I'll tell you one little quick story before we get back to talking about the reference pack. I was at I was lucky enough to hang out a bit with Frank Thomas. A friend of mine was teaching him, tutoring him in lessons on computer animation, believe it or not. Frank Thomas actually studied computer animation with my friend. And he'd go to UCLA, where my friend was studying, and take lessons. And we'd all, hang out and ask him questions and stuff. And one night someone asked Frank, what do you think of the new Snow White video that came out? And he said, well, the colors are very nice. Of course, they're not the colors we used in 1937, but they're nice. That was a nice way of saying it, but sometimes videos are not the same as the film themselves. As much as you would just assume that they would be, they aren't. So let's go back, Davey. You got more to talk about CinemaScope?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Is the other cartoon, the other Disney cartoon, No Hunting, was directed by Jack Hanna, and it has a lot of really funny animation by John Sibley.
Sibley is a genius too. I love
my favorite
Sibley animation. Yeah.
Me too.
One thing that this particular image really shows, I saw Fantasia 2000 on an IMAX screen.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came out, I had no idea what the Rhapsody in Blue sequence, what was going on there. And the reason was because the film was cutting so fast, and the center of focus for each bit of action was on different sides of the screen, and the screen is the size of a billboard. So something would be happening on the right, and I'd be looking at it. The scene would cut to something happening on the left. By the time my head turned and I looked over to the left to see what was going on, it had cut again, and the focus of action was in another place. So I didn't even know that it was multiple characters' stories interweaved when I came out of the theater. I had,
you were sitting too close,
and I'm usually I'm pretty good at reading stuff. They had that problem with CinemaScope. It was so wide, and when you get into action and stuff, and you start throwing things to the left and the right, the audience can get confused and not know what to look at. So a lot of times they would center the characters like this. You see this in CinemaScope all the time. They also did that because the reason CinemaScope was created was to compete with television. And they knew that these films would eventually be on television and have to be panned and scanned, which means that
so they can just cut off the sides.
Yeah, you just cut the sides off.
I've always found that to be unfortunate that some of these CinemaScope films don't feel designed for the format.
Yeah, Mike Law said that he was excited at first making CinemaScope films at MGM, and then when they gave him all the rules of things to make sure that it was consistent with everything. The other thing was that not every theater ran CinemaScope. So when you made a cartoon, you also had to make a version that was for regular screens. So you'd do an Academy format and you'd do a CinemaScope version.
Sounds like making commercials now for anything, because you have to make commercials that work this way and this way.
Well, what they would do is, like, if you see layouts from Lady and the Tramp, they'd actually have two different fieldings on the same background.
Wow.
And they would shift the pegs on the characters to move characters into the field. And they'd actually physically shoot it twice with completely different setups.
Wow.
A lot of work, and, consistency, and, what do they call that? Standardization is more important than we think. When you've got a format like Academy television format, 133, you've got a format that went for so many years. You can make something and everyone's going to see it properly, but you make CinemaScope and it's only been out for a few years. You have no idea what you're going to end up having the screen what kind of screen it's going to be projected on and what aspect ratio.
That's crazy. So
because they made all these compromises, eventually they just kind of gave up on CinemaScope. And now we have the HD proportions that are consistent between television now and movies.
Right.
So it's kind of gone back to where it was originally with 133, except now it's 178, which is slightly wider. But when you compose for a format, you can do amazing things. Obviously a CinemaScope cartoon can do things that an Academy format one just can't do. But when a character enters from the left and exits on the right, in a CinemaScope cartoon, it's going to take longer for him to get from one side to the other than it does if it's an Academy format. So it messed up timing, it messed up staging, it messed up compositions. So when you see a really good CinemaScope cartoon, it's really good. And Disney was one of the places that did really good CinemaScope cartoons.
Cool. I'm not as familiar with this one as the other one.
It doesn't get shown much because of the guns.
Cool. So now the international section that you mentioned earlier, cartoons from Germany, Russia, Croatia, and Poland, all in this ref pack. So first is a cartoon from Germany by Hans Fischerkoesen called Weather-Beaten Melody from 1943. And Fischerkoesen was often referred to as the Walt Disney of Germany. But unlike Disney, his experience was mostly in short-form commercials and not long narratives. Because of this, Fischerkoesen was partnered with a newspaper cartoonist who was responsible for scripts for a proposed slate of animated films. So Fischerkoesen went to work on 3 animated films that would introduce the German animation industry to the whole world. And
I'll say the part that you're being nice and avoiding. The person that hired Fischerkoesen to make these films was Adolf Hitler. Hitler and Goering loved Walt Disney. There's stories about Hitler getting bootleg copies of Disney films imported, Mickey Mouse particularly, to Germany during World War II so that he could screen them at his castles and his bunkers and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was jealous of that, and he wanted his own German version of that. So he hired Fischerkoesen, who is a brilliant animator. And like, for instance, this scene here is a pan shot that's multiplaned with 16 different layers. Yeah. As the camera pans, each one of those flowers there moves at a different rate. So it looks like it's like you're actually down in a field. Amazing. And it's got jazz. So I imagine, jazz was outlawed in Nazi Germany. So I imagine that probably caused him a little bit of problems. He was eventually, what do you call it? Pardoned for collaborating with the Nazis, because obviously making animated films isn't the same as doing horrible wartime crimes. Yeah. So he came back in Germany and he was first in the Russian side in behind the Iron Curtain, and he escaped and went to the free side of Berlin, or not Berlin. Whatever. He went on the other side of the Iron Curtain and created a commercial studio again.
Yeah.
So that's Fischerkoesen. He's really interesting.
Well,
and his films are incredible.
The other Fischerkoesen film in here is The Snowman. Yeah, that one.
I know that one.
Also from 1943. This and The Weather-Beaten Melody are 2 of the 3 films he produced during World War II.
Pez, do you know why I picked this particular frame to represent this?
Because it's funny looking?
Well, yeah. It's because of the chicken's butt.
Yeah, it's got a little hole there.
Yep. Next.
Interesting drawing style on these.
Yeah, I think he probably followed illustrators more than animators.
Oh my gosh. I'm just loading
even though
up.
The stuff's very simple.
Oh wow, he used like a Fleischer type multiplane camera in the beginning of the other film that you were talking about. He does this crane shot where he like goes over a field of flowers
and then comes down into the field, down to the bug's eye view. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Requiring, I guess you said 16 layers.
Yeah. This guy is a genius, and these are really nice prints of films that you don't get to see too much.
Yeah.
So if you aren't a member, join just for this. It's worth it.
Yeah. And the comic you restored.
So now we got a cartoon from Russia called Cipollino the Onion Boy from 1961. So this story began as a fairy tale in an Italian children's magazine. It's set in a world that's populated by anthropomorphic fruits and veggies. The Cipollino fought Prince Lemon and Lord Tomato to free the townsfolk from oppression. So yes.
The interesting thing here is that a lot of Russian films during this period, they were trying to get away from Western style animation. So they did a lot of rotoscopy looking stuff and a lot of very elaborate. We've shared that in previous reference packs. Russian fairy tales with very elaborate animation on ones of realistic horses running and that sort of thing.
I know what movie you're talking about, and it's got like people in like overly designed costumes too.
Yeah, very, very. I mean, so elaborate. It must have been a ton of work. But apparently, this director was kind of a rebel among that, and he said, "What's wrong with following Western standards? We can learn from them." Mm-hmm, so he got a hold of. It was difficult, but he got a hold of every Fleischer film, every Warner Brothers film, every Disney film that he could get, and he studied the animation techniques. And if you look at this film and how it moves very much like a late 40s MGM cartoon. Mm-hmm. It's got that snappy kind of Tom and Jerry posing and timing. And the story itself is an Italian fairy tale. So he didn't follow any of the Russian style at all. He had his own thing that he was approaching, and it made him very popular at the studio because he was the best timer of animation of anyone at the studio.
Because he was using the Western techniques,
right? So I won't even attempt to. Soyuz Multfilm was the big Russian animation studio, which was huge. You know, we think, oh, Disney is a big studio. Soyuz Multfilm was bigger.
Really?
They were bigger, and they lasted. They're still in business to this day, and they published or produced thousands and thousands of animated films.
When was this made? Because it looks modern in a way.
No, this one isn't
61. My bad. 61.
61. It is 61. Yeah,
okay.
Things in Russia have a tendency to look kind of like maybe 10 years behind what we were doing. So in the 50s, they were doing stuff that looked like Snow White. Yeah. And in the 60s, they were doing stuff that looked like Tom and Jerry. So
this has this weird.
But look at that pose, Pez. That's like an Irv Spence pose, right?
Yeah.
Totally strong line of action, clear silhouettes,
grounded. The weight distribution.
Yep, directing the eye.
But then the background style feels like very 60s, 70s. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
it's an interesting.
It's not like graphic. It's just simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sets the characters off there, you know.
Oh.
It's awesome. It's really cool looking cartoon.
So this is another Russian cartoon called New Pogodi, which translates to "Well, Just You Wait." And this one is Episode 5, City Streets Metro. So we've been sharing
a lot of these, and this is the most popular cartoons ever made in Russia. They took a poll, and this is Russia's equivalent of Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse or SpongeBob, or all rolled into one. It's kind of like the series is a lot like Roadrunner and Coyote, where it's the predator and the prey. But they had never seen a Roadrunner cartoon. They'd never seen a Tom and Jerry cartoon when these films started. They just kind of stumbled on the same formula.
But the studio didn't like it at first. Thought it was
they thought. Again, the style at Russia was to try and create something that's noble and inimitably
I think the word you're looking for is boring.
Well, no, I don't think those elaborate Russian fairy tale films are boring either. They're just different.
I think they have good moments in them that are really great to learn from,
but they're not pure entertainment.
Yeah, you can't just sit and watch those things from beginning to end.
Well, the other problem is that we're getting Russian films that aren't translated, so you can't. The dialogue and story is probably more important in those than they are in slapstick.
And there's almost no dialogue in this cartoon, and like the last one, the backgrounds are simple, and these characters are rarely on model, so the focus is on expressive poses and movement, and they
smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and not just one cigarette at a time.
The whole pack.
Yep.
Hey, I just pulled up the cartoon myself, and there's this scene here with the phone booth, and he does some kind of like dizzy spinning around in the street, almost getting hit by a car. It totally feels like a Wile E. Coyote type scene.
Exactly.
But they hadn't seen that stuff yet, huh?
Nope.
It's incredible. Nope.
So next is a series from Croatia, Maxi Cat mini cartoons from 1971. So in last month's live stream, we talked about the movie The Four Poster, which included a revolutionary animated sequence by UPA's John Hubley. So animators Dusan Vukotic and Vatroslav Mimika were inspired by that and decided to create animated films in that UPA style. So with a really small sample of UPA's work to inspire them, they interpreted their own theories of stylization and motion and created a completely unique style that became known as the Zagreb School, which is like the antithesis of the Disney style. And the Zagreb films were adult, stylized, cynical, ironic. They focused on how the little guy is manipulated by forces beyond his control. So this ref pack has 6 episodes of this Maxi Cat series. 24 mini cartoons were made based on a simple premise, and they play off a simple sequence of gags building to a topper gag. So there's no attempt at telling a story or conveying complicated personalities. They're just plain fun.
And each cartoon is a minute long. So it basically sets up a premise, does a few variations, and then a topper gag, which is a really good way if you're a student and you want to do study films. It's really good to do short form films like this, as opposed to, I see a lot of people who go to animation school, and when they say, oh, you're going to make a film, okay, I'm going to make a film. And you ask them, what kind of film are they making? They say, oh, it's 22 minutes long. And immediately how are you going to do that? They're
like, I'm going to make a trailer. They're like, I'm going to make a trailer for my feature right now as my student film.
Yeah. But you don't learn from making one film. You learn from making a million films.
Yeah.
You also don't learn how to direct and cut a film by making a trailer, because trailer is a bunch of different random scenes stuck together, versus if you make a little short film, it's, a story.
Well, these are a great model, because here's a 1-minute film that has a beginning, middle, and end and feels like a complete thing. It doesn't feel like a test, yet each one is different. Each one has something different in it. And if a student took that and said, okay, I'm going to do something that has 2 characters arguing in this one, or my theme this time is going to be, someone tripping and falling. And you did that, or lip sync. I want to have funny lip sync. And you just do one thing in a 1-minute film, and then move on to something else and do something else. You'll grow as an animator really fast compared to trying to make long form narrative films that
you'll never finish anyway.
Yeah.
When did you say this was
finished anyway?
Yeah.
When did you say this was made, these films?
These are late 60s, early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, this is 71. Yeah.
71.
Really cool.
Yeah.
So did Ralph Bakshi see these things? Was he inspired by these? Do you know?
I don't think so. Ralph didn't look at a lot of other people's films.
He didn't look at other people's films while he was in production on anything.
No, and I once asked him, like, have you ever seen a Russ Meyer film? And he said, no, I deliberately didn't look at Russ Meyer. because he wanted to look at life and translate life. So he didn't study other films.
He studied
loves
other art
jazz.
forms.
He studies jazz. He studies a lot
Yeah.
of other things, and fine art. But
It just reminded me of his stuff a little bit.
yeah.
So
Yeah, he's got a kind of a nice natural sort of style like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this here
Okay.
is a cartoon from Poland called Cat and Mouse. This is from 1958. This is also clearly influenced by UPA films. So Cat and Mouse juggles the three fundamental elements of artistic rendering: line, shape, and form. So there's simple flat colors and shapes don't move flat like modern Flash cartoons. The camera moves around them at times in perspective, creating a feeling of space. And with more detailed and elaborate designs, animating in perspective would be really hard. But with flat shapes, the animator is able to visualize them a lot easier. So I guess the idea is like simple designs, but very complicated maneuvers.
And you have a character here that's entirely just line.
Yeah.
One
The
character
color
is line. The other
What's
one is
that?
flat shapes.
What's that? A hole
And then
in the floor?
hole.
Oh.
Yeah, and the mouse dives into his mouth and goes down out the hole, and the cat goes, where is he? Feels his tummy.
That's funny.
It's a good gag.
The color's really expressive.
Yeah, it's a very fun cartoon.
It's a good example of a fun graphic cartoon.
And the sort of thing that one person could do all
Wow.
by themselves.
Wow, look at that.
All right, now our much anticipated anime section. So this time we feature 2 episodes from the 1975 series Hajime Ningen Gyatorz, which translates to First Human Gyatorz. So First Human Gyatorz is
I was in Little Tokyo a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, hey, I love the cartoon about the frog shirt that you posted, that JoJo found for us and posted. And all these people in these vintage Little Tokyo shops here in LA that, you know, they've got all the different anime stuff. The stuff that you're finding here, Steve, they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, or oh, I saw that when I was a kid. I've never seen it since. Like, you guys are finding the rarest of the rare of anime. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's anime when it wasn't a formula. It's anime when every single show looked entirely different and did things different.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at that elephant or the
Fantastic.
mastodon or whatever.
That's so odd.
That is so fun, though. Man, look at everything about that is fun. It just
So there was apparently there was a note in the style guide to not draw the characters volumetrically, but rather in the flat style.
If you look at the poses on the characters, they never do them in 3/4. They always turn them flat.
Yeah,
they do. Let's see more.
Well, the backgrounds are very dimensional, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's more often the other way around. So there's a lot of funny designs in the series and very simple and effective staging. So that's episode 36A, and then the next one's
I'm
episode
really inspired
44B.
just by watching you guys go through this reference pack. I mean, I've downloaded this, but I'm becoming more inspired just looking at it like this.
Yeah, hopefully these live streams will encourage people to go dig into this stuff, because I hope people to go in and still frame through it and find frames that they like and do screen caps. And
I love these character designs.
And you can download your articles, Steve, which is great.
Yeah,
this has what is this, 80 something? This looks like Klasky Chupo kind of stuff a little bit.
Well, the lines, there's not wiggly lines, but in the design, in the shapes, kind of, though. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I don't like Klasky as much as this stuff. It's awesome.
Under her chin. That's almost like Picasso.
Yeah.
But
It's like Picasso. It's a. Oh yeah, she's naked. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
Really stylish backgrounds.
And fun at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this doesn't even use I'm looking at it right now. This doesn't even use formula mouth shapes the way the anime will eventually, right?
No, it doesn't use much formula at all. It's got a lot of dialogue scenes that are what they do is what most television shows do is they have bread and butter scenes that are easier to animate, that give them more opportunity to use resources on action scenes and scenes that require more. So yeah, there is some dialogue that are just flapping mouths, but when there's candy in there like this particular shot, it's worth gorgeous. It, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And weird ideas, here are I forget what they are. They're some sort of Japanese demons beating on drums around King Kong having a fight with some sort of pterodactyl. It's fun,
That's really good.
All right,
it's cool that it can get so epic.
So next thing here in the reference pack is an analysis of resistance in animation. And
we needed David here for this, but David couldn't be here today.
Right. It's done by David Eisman. So I'll do just a quick rundown of his analysis.
Okay.
So first I'll differentiate weight from resistance. So when a character is lifting a heavy object, the animation might switch to 2s, and the pose might ease into 1 with a strong line of action to emphasize the weight of the object. However, if that character were to pull on a rope that's tied to an anchor that has been drilled into the ground, they would be met with resistance, not weight. So then David breaks down the 4 types of resistance: pulling, pushing, outward, and inward. So pulling resistance can be emphasized with staggers. The stagger is where poses are displaced in opposite directions over a sequence of frames in order to create that like shaking, turbulent effect. So that's a great example.
Yeah.
To prove the existence of resistance, the follow through is really important.
It's usually an overshoot. Beak.
Yeah.
Like a really fast settle.
Yeah.
Like a snap.
Then there's pushing resistance. So if a character pushes on an object, the resulting pose and line of action will look different than if the character's pulling. So in this action, first there's a catalyst where the 2 counter forces are generated and begin to oppose each other. Then a series of staggers as the 2 forces fight. And finally, a follow-through where one of the forces is overcome.
One thing I want to say is that David's articles, I'm not an animator, and a lot of the technical aspects of animation, the timing and the spacing, and those things are all critical. And David is really good at being able to analyze those things, break them down, and put them into words and tiny examples. And if you're doing anything on the reference pack, downloading those little breakdown clips, still framing through them and downloading David's article. Every article in the reference pack has a link saying download this article.
Yeah, and
save the article and his examples, and you've got a university level class in animation techniques.
Yeah. Yeah, go on the website right now and read this article.
Yeah,
if you remember.
Yeah. We all have Peter Pan on DVD or Disney Plus, but it's not about that. It's about knowing what scene to look at, what principles to take out of it. And you're not going to know that unless you read the analysis.
And developing that analytical mind so that when you see something, you immediately start thinking, how is it done? It's like a magician watching another magician sees different things than an average person watching a magician doing his tricks.
That's a really good point. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's that Grim Natwick scene with Wally Walrus, isn't it?
I'm not sure. It might be.
It was that
He
scene
did
with
funny
the bed.
Wally.
Yeah,
he did funny Wally Walrus scenes.
Oh, what do you have in store for the silent stuff this time?
In the slapstick section, this time it's we feature 2 Billy Bevan silent comedies.
Billy Bevan.
Billy Bevan? Okay.
Mm.
Billy Bevan, he was born in Australia in the 1880s, and he was performing on stage as a young kid, and his stage experience made him very skilled at pantomime, and he became a crucial part of the Senate troupe. And just about every great silent movie clown got their start at the Senate troupe, including Chaplin and Fatty Arbuckle, Harold Lloyd, W.C. Fields, Bing Crosby. And Bevan joined Andy Clark, Ben Turpin, Chester Conklin, James Finlayson, and Edgar
That's
Kennedy.
James Finlayson in the lower corner here. And you might remember him from the Laurel and Hardy short where they're selling Christmas trees.
I do remember
that. They tear apart his house. He was famous. He is famous for a modern cartoon character. Do you know what he contributed to a modern cartoon character?
This guy?
Yeah, James Finlayson, lower right-hand corner there. He is the man. He is the man who said "Doh," D-O-H, which was picked up by Homer Simpson. Yeah, it comes from James Finlayson. Doh.
So yeah, these guys were in Keystone comedies. I guess this one's a Keystone comedy. The Keystone comedies, they were shot quickly and edited quickly, no scripts. And the troupe would just choose a theme or a location and improvise gags on the spot. So when you watch these shorts, you want to pay attention to the staging and timing rather than like subtle acting or story construction. They're just simple gag films.
Where were these made, Steve?
There's no subtle acting in this image here.
Are these so there's like a Keystone studio building that still stands in Echo Park. Is that where these were done? It is?
Yeah.
Wow,
so
that's cool.
This first one is called She Sighs by the Seaside from 1921. And about half the film was lost, but what remains is important to study, particularly the way the crowds are handled. They're handled as groups rather than as individuals, which keeps the stage clear, so the main performers are what you're focusing on.
One of the things that's unique about these particular silent films is that Keystone, since they were kind of making it up as they went along, they didn't have a rigid narrative structure that the gags fit in. It was more just like variation after variation. And each one could come out and be plugged in different orders or whatever. When they were editing it, they could kind of pick how they wanted it to play. And that led to, in the 60s, for them to be chosen for compilation films where they'd cut clips out and do like a best of silent comedy.
Because they don't require context.
Yeah, they don't require context. You just go, you know who the bad guy is. You know who the good guy is. You know who the goofy clown is. Okay, just do your gags. But they'd make these films when comedy was king, was one of the famous ones, where they basically took each one of the great silent movie clowns and did a little sequence with them, showing here's Laurel and Hardy, here's Keystone Cops, here's Charlie Chaplin, that sort of thing.
Is that why this one's chopped up?
Well, that's why these things survived in fragments, because when they were doing these things, or when they did Fractured Flickers, which was a Jay Ward show that used silent films with Rocky and Bullwinkle voice actors over the top of it, making jokes. The film editor went to the film vaults, and he pulled out a film that was in deteriorating and almost gone. And he'd order new prints to be struck of the bits that he was going to use in the show. And obviously they couldn't afford to strike new prints of the entire feature film that he was taking it from. But that's the reason why a lot of films survive in fragmentary form. The fragments that Skip Craig, the editor at J. Ward, chose to be in fractured flickers got preserved. And if he hadn't have done that, if there hadn't been for fractured flickers, or if there hadn't been Robert Youngston's When Comedy Was King, we wouldn't have the Laurel and Hardy famous pie fight that was missing a big sequence that was recently discovered and restored to the film.
Really?
So these films were not intended, by the time TV came around, by the time talkies came around, this stuff was dead. Nobody wanted to see it. If you showed it in a theater, they would laugh at you and go to another theater. So the films weren't preserved. They were just kind of tossed in a corner if they survived at all.
When did people, like animators obviously have studied Chaplin for a long time, but when did general public start saying, oh, these things need to be preserved, like 70s, 50s?
Well, Chaplin owned his own films, and so did Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
And Keaton had copies of all of his films. And that's why those three guys are the most known. Oh. Because they actually preserved their own stuff, right? But it wasn't until probably the 70s or 80s.
That's crazy.
When home video started, that people started going back and saying, hey, let's put Roman Navarro movie on VHS. That was when they started going looking for the other stuff.
I thought it was in the 50s when TV was looking for programming. So not everything.
Yeah, 50s did too. They were kind of there was a company called Blackhawk Films.
Yep.
That went out and grabbed up all of the original elements that they could and preserved them and distributed them for home use on 16 millimeter and 8 millimeter, and also were a source for clips for TV shows as well when they wanted to do something. I remember when I was a kid, I'd watch the Soupy Sales show, and he would do narrate a little story, and the story would be illustrated by clips from silent films that probably came from Blackhawk.
You know what I just realized? What's the name of this man that's on the screen right now with the lifeguard shirt?
This is you asked me names again, and when I'm if the camera wasn't on, I would know it immediately. This is Ben Turpin.
Okay, Ben Turpin. So
yeah,
this character that he's playing, I don't know if it's got like a name like the Tramp, but this character with this mustache style and the hat like that, and I've watched some of these before. They made a different version of him in Sesame Street in an Elmo segment where he would open a window and see a guy that looked just like this with the longer mustache like that.
Yeah, that was a Keystone. That walrus mustache was a Keystone thing. The Keystone Cops, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So
they had a lot of good prop gags too.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other one, right?
Yeah.
This is Lizzie's of the Field, which is a little more ambitious than the other one, because there's automobiles and props, and there's a road race finale.
Look at that framing of the composition. It's great.
Cool. So now finally the bonus section, which if all that wasn't enough, there's a bonus section. And this is a rerun of reference pack number 17.
They don't deserve it. Don't even show it to them.
Of course they do.
I love this first one, though. It's one of my favorite items in any of the ref packs. The ebook of Willard Mullard's sports cartoons. Yeah. Willard Mullins sports cartoons.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, he has such energy in his drawings. Incredible.
Yeah. When did you write this?
What the bonus section is we've done 48 reference packs to this point. And people always say, oh, can't you leave all the bonus packs or all the reference packs up all the time? And no, we can't, because our bandwidth would go crazy. So what we do is every other reference pack, we add a rerun reference pack. And those who have listened this far in this podcast, I'll give you a little bit of a secret. But beginning in February, we're going to start running a new bonus reference pack in between our regular every other month reference pack. And that'll mean that there will be a new reference pack every single month if you're a member of Animation Resources.
We're hitting
so
50,
there's another
right?
reason to join while the dues are cheap.
Yeah, and you're hitting a reference pack number 50 then, aren't you, Steve?
Yes, that'll be reference pack 50.
The big 50.
So there's
how many can I do before I die?
There's at least 100.
There's more in this rerun. There's a half hour puppet films by the great Lot Reininger.
Lottie.
I
hate to correct you. It's embarrassing, but all these foreign names, I know it's really difficult. If everybody could be named Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson.
But Lottie's a big deal. She's one of the first female directors in animation, right?
And she directed the
first feature,
the oldest surviving animated feature.
Yeah,
Adventures.
And she does incredible work with silhouettes.
She did that Prince.
This one is interesting because it's her silhouette puppets, but it's in color.
Yeah.
And she gets an awful lot of really distinctive and realistic looking animation out of flat puppets, which you wouldn't believe were flat when you see it move.
Cool. And and then finally 2 CinemaScope cartoons in their original aspect ratio and in HD. Is that why you reran this ref pack? Because the CinemaScope?
No, but it's just I've got cycles on cycles and they happen to line up, I guess.
That's
so
crazy. This
particular
is very good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying that John Dormat cartoon, Topsy TV, is very, very good.
The Dinky cartoon is a lot of fun too. In the beginning, it starts out as a normal cartoon, and then Dinky jumps off the screen and quits, saying that he's tired of regular old Terry Toons. And at that point, the screen widens and becomes CinemaScope. It's a really nice effect.
So that's Ref Pack 48. We're going to be doing these pretty regularly, like at least once a month. And coming up, we'll be doing a screening and seminar on acting for animation. So that one will just be recorded, but I'm excited for this. And David Eisman will start hosting regular movie nights and much more. So thank you to everyone who's watching, and especially huge thank you to all of our members. And without you, none of this is possible. So just to recap, Animation Resources is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to preserving art from the past and using it to inform art of the future. Paying members get access to a new reference pack every other month. And the reference packs, like the one we went through, include rare animated films and ebooks. It's filled with cartooning and illustration, all work you'd probably never otherwise see. The material for these reference packs come from industry veterans like Ralph Bakshi, Sherm Cohen, Will Finn, and Steve Stanchfield. They share their personal collections with us, material that they've gathered and found useful to them throughout their careers. And Steve Worth and a group of dedicated volunteers digitize and organize this material into a database. The database now has over 9,000 digitized animated films and over 125,000 high-resolution images. Steve finds what's most important, or what animators and students will find most useful, and puts it all into these handy reference packs. It costs $70 to be a member when you're a student, and $95 for the general membership. And there's also a quarterly membership, which is $30 for 3 months. If you want to continue to grow as an artist, it's important that you start building your own reference library. You don't want to rely on the same bag of tricks that you've learned in school or on your first job and just use that your whole life. That's a great way to become stagnant. Because the industry is always changing, and it's important that you're always growing and learning new things in order to stay employable. So that's what Animation Resources offers you. It's world-class self-study material. It's useful not just for animators, but I think any kind of visual artist, painters, illustrators, cartoonists, sculptors, filmmakers, photographers. I don't know how long.
I know people that work in costume design and in video games that are members and have been members for a long time.
Oh yeah,
and they use it all the time. Yeah, concept artists. Yeah.
I don't know how
Viz dev. That's what they like to be called.
Would have taken me to get a job if I didn't discover Animation Resources while I was still a student.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you don't mind our stumbling show.
We'll have to, next time it'll go way smoother.
Yeah.
That's right. Smooth like ice.
Ice.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having me, guys.